What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The third generation of Durango appeared at the turn of 2010 and 2011. If first generation model let us new, then second practically passed by the Russian buyer. The third one was much more interesting, and not only externally. Durango became a sibling of Jeep Grand Cherokee, and in its basis instead of a pickup frame was slightly modified platform of Mercedes-Benz ML. Moreover, the Dodge received a wheelbase increased by 13 centimeters, which allowed to make the car 7-seater, unlike the Grand Cherokee. The lack of some options like air suspension, as well as exclusively gasoline engine range has not become a problem in the U.S., so the Durango since its appearance has a stable circulation of 50 to 65,000 copies per year. However, on our market these cars are present in homeopathic doses, as only ardent enthusiasts dare to pay for customs clearance. So, the secondary market for the model is extremely scarce. For example, at the time of writing, there were only 12 cars for sale on Avito, 3 pre-restyling, 8 restyling and 1 very fresh. After the second restyling of 2020. But these options are very expensive, as a car's under 5 years old and with V8 engines. So we will pay attention to pre-restyling and early restyled copies, which can be found for moderate for the class money, 3 to 4 million rubles. Is it difficult to buy and maintain Durango, and are there a lot of pitfalls when choosing? If we talk about the body, it should not disappoint, these cars are too rare to be unattended. The Durango's image status usually makes owners take care of its appearance, so it's unlikely to notice rust on the body. On the other hand, on cars that have been in accidents, corrosion is more active, and local buyers sometimes do not hesitate to save money by buying slightly beaten cars from the USA. So, when buying, it's worth spending money not only on a local inspection service like Autoteca. The local climate is not very favorable to American models. The local climate is not very favorable for American models. Corrosion usually occurs in typical areas, fender edges, sills, door bottoms, and in the license plate recess on the fifth door. Installing additional footrests, especially locally, often exacerbates the problem, so the underside of the sills, including the seams, is worth checking carefully. Absolutely vertical front part collects stones and all road debris from ahead cars, so that chips on the hood and wiped headlights are a constant headache for Durango owners. And also at all brutality and constant all-wheel drive, this automobile is not the king of off-road. Geometrical passability is extremely unimportant because of big overhangs and low-hanging lip of front bumper. So if there is no lip, and the bottom hints at combat trips, it is necessary to think about other potential problems. Another simultaneously good and not so good news concerns the cost of body parts. It seems that all of them should cost fabulous money, but in practice you can find a lot of them for a reasonable price. This brings us back to the point about the importance of checking accident history, given the high residual value of cars. Accident reconstruction usually makes sense. Of course, most parts are only available to order, but that's not surprising at all. What is surprising, though, is the cost of some parts. For example, a front fender in the original version costs 40 to 60,000, but a piece analog can be bought for only 12 to 15,000. The hood has a 6-figure price tag, but there is an alternative for 30 to 35,000, which is quite affordable even against the background of many mass local models. The cost of head optics depends on the performance and reaches 150 to 200,000 rubles per headlight, but the basic halogen version will cost 40 to 50,000, and even here there is a variant of non-original for 20,000. The windshield is interchangeable with Grand Cherokee, so there are enough options instead of the original for 100 to 15,000. You can buy an analog for 10 to 20,000. But with bumpers everything is a bit more complicated. Here you have to buy the original, which costs from 40 to 60,000 in the case of the front bumper, and from 25 to 30,000 for the rear one. It goes without saying that there is no need to count on dismantling shops, and even the neighboring countries are unlikely to help. You find everything you need. It is also worth taking into account the current difficulties with deliveries from abroad, delivery terms and conditions, but the technical part will bring much less difficulties in repair and maintenance. It is not difficult to guess that it is worth to thank for it the kinship with Grand Cherokee, which is officially present in our market and shares with Durango almost all technical base. Suspensions are identical, double wishbone in front and multi-lever at the rear, differences only in nuances. For example, Durango, as we already know, is deprived of optional air balloons. So all the hardware is available for purchase and usually has a wide range of analogs. For example, the front upper arm assembly can be bought at a price from $3,000 to $15,000, although the original costs $30,000 and is delivered under the order. The lower one costs under $100,000, but it can also be bought non-original for $10,000 to $25,000. There are no original silent blocks for the levers, but third-party manufacturers also offer a wide selection of silent blocks, and even some repair ball joints. Stabilizer struts are available from 1,000 rubles at the price of the original in $10,000 to $12,000. Shock absorbers, both front and rear, cost $15,000 to $20,000 apiece, but there are piece options from a well-known manufacturer at $8,000 to $10,000. The front hub bearing is changed only in assembly with the hub, which can cost from $6,000 to $25,000 in the non-original version and $30,000 in the original. Behind the bearing can be changed separately, and the price tag is lower, from $3,000 for the analog and $15,000 for the firm. The rear multilever is not too cheap either, but it is not ruinous in repair. Upper transverse levers cost about $12,000. Durango has rather large brakes, but the mechanisms are quite usual, two-piston mechanisms, with a floating bracket in front and single piston at the rear. Of course, on powerful special versions they were replaced by multi-piston monoblocks, and the current owners also often dabble in tuning, and there are enough options. Basic discs have 330 or 350 mm in diameter in front, and behind are installed discs on 330 mm in two variants, ventilated and not. Handlebar here is a classic drum, with a mechanism inside the disc, and moreover, it will please with a classic pedal design without expensive electromechanical drives. Consumables cost quite moderate money. For example, an original front disc costs $8,000 to $10,000 and a non-original one from $3,000 to $15,000. Rear discs are more expensive, under $30,000 or even more, but analogs are within the same $2,000 to $15,000. You can buy a set of pads for $1,500, but a decent one will cost $5,000 to $7,000, which is still cheaper than the original ones for $40,000. Durango has power steering, but there is a little catch. On cars with a base engine of 3.6 liters, the pump is not mechanical, but electric, which raises its price to six-figure numbers. And the restored unit will cost $80,000. And here on cars with 5.7-liter V8 pump is usual drive and costs much cheaper, $45,000 to $50,000 for a new original and $10,000 to $20,000 for analogs. Taking into account that with a budget of $3 million you can count just on the basic motor, the condition of the pump should be given increased attention, listening to it for noises and checking it on the move. But the rack in all cars is common, and it also fits from Grand Cherokee. It allows not to order a new rail from the States for 150,000 rubles, but to buy a reconditioned complete rail for 30,000 to 45,000. Or to rebuild your own for comparable money. The Durango's transmission is all-wheel drive, with a transfer case and center differential, but Dodge didn't get the extended off-road arsenal available for Jeep. There's usually not even a downshift, although a two-speed transfer case with a reduction gear was available for the model. In any case, the all-wheel drive is non-disengageable, so it's worth checking the transfer case for noises and leaks in the all-wheel drive for performance when buying. But usually the transfer case is not the weakest element of the transmission, and before stretching the chain and wear of gears and bearings passes more than 200,000 kilometers. It is worth paying attention to the cardan. They are traditionally ordered only as an assembly, so the repair can be expensive. Transmissions on Durango were installed only automatic, but their variants can be quite a lot. Pre-restyling cars with the base engine were equipped with a 5-speed gearbox W5A580, which is better known as 5G, Tronic 722.6 made by Mercedes. This is a very reliable unit, which with proper maintenance can pass 250,000 to 300,000 before the first opening for repair of the torque converter and replacement of its locking pads, and even more before a complete reassembly. Certainly, on a heavy off-roader the box works not in the simplest conditions, but in general chances for good resource are very great. Especially if not to abuse sharp starts. Well, and repair of this automatic transmission will not be too budgetary, despite the fact that it debuted in the 90s. However, variations of 8-speed gearbox of 8 HP series from ZF, which appeared after restyling, will be even more expensive in repair. The base motor is combined with a box 845i, again a version of 8 HP, and V8 engines are paired with 8 HP 70. These are also very good boxes, capable of high mileage before overhaul, although their sensitivity to maintenance is higher. Oil change every 50,000 kilometers, external cooling radiator and additional filter are ideal allies of these automatic transmissions. Which will help not to think about repair. Well, if the box pushes when shifting or reminds of itself by humming and howling, it comes to a serious bargaining or refusal to buy. Another option, own automatic transmission from Chrysler with index 65 RFE. It, too, is quite the choice of motors on Durango. On the one hand, is narrow, a 3-liter diesel engine, offered for Grand Cherokee, was unavailable for it. On the other hand, there are enough gasoline engines, the basic V6 and several variants of V8, the most massive of which is an atmospheric version for 5.7 liters. For us the most relevant should be considered V6 for 3.6 liters. In Russia it is known, for example, for the second generation. Chrysler 300C. It is quite modern. There is an all-aluminum construction, phaser regulators on the inlet and outlet and 2 camshafts in each cylinder head. On the other hand, there is no direct injection and supercharging, and the timing is chain and quite reliable, which promises a decent resource and moderate investments in maintenance. However, investments in transportation tax are in any case exorbitant. Even without supercharging, this motor gives out 300 horsepower, forcing owners to pay more than 40,000 rubles a year. Against this background, someone can think about a variant with V8, although the Motor 5.7 gives out already under 400 horsepower. But here everything is already really. The unit with the Index 9 EZH has a lower shaft design with 2 valves per cylinder, drives from the very bottom and gives a real sound in exchange for an average consumption of 25 liters per 100. Taking into account the power of the engines, the purchase of Durango should be calculated on the basis of your own budget and not only the budget of purchase, but also maintenance. Repair will not be too cheap, but it will not ruin, but the cost of fuel and transportation tax will be regular in any case. In addition, the cost of cars on the secondary market varies greatly depending on the age and motor, so you have to choose from what is available. However, decent variants are found, for example, restyling Durango with a Motor 3.6 and a declared mileage of less than 150,000 kilometers from the only owner in Russia. If Carfax and Autoteca will confirm honesty of mileage and accident-free history, and diagnostics will not reveal technical problems, Durango can become a desirable image car for every day, but without excessive exoticism and technique. In conclusion, the Dodge Durango III presents a compelling alternative to the Grand Cherokee, offering a unique blend of style, performance, and practicality. With its distinctive design and robust features, it stands out in a crowded market. However, the price tag of $3 million raises questions about value and competition. Ultimately, whether it's worth the investment depends on your personal preferences and needs. If you prioritize originality and versatility in an SUV, the Durango 3 could be a worthy choice. Thank you for watching, and we hope this analysis helps you make an informed decision.